so much for being on Give It a Nudge today. We're so excited to share your story, but more so because this is one of our first ones in the UK. For our audience, can we start by just giving a little introduction, who you are, where you've come from, that's brought you to here today?
Okay, shall I start?
Go for it.
So I actually started my career just as .com and mobile kind of world exploded. So my whole career has been around digital and mobile. So I've kind of really seen it evolve, but I've very much kind of come from that product side, but then also had to go and have it worked within strategic partnerships and business development. And the bit that always was the challenge was how do you get someone from an idea through to actually kind of developing it out, which, as we will explain more, is how we kind of evolved. But yeah, so I actually, we both met at Nokia. I've worked at Vodafone, I've worked for digital transformation agencies, I've worked for startups. So yeah, I've kind of had a little bit of everything, but very much is born into mobile.
Product and mobile.
Yes.
James?
Yeah, and then from my side of things, I essentially started my world in the world of development. So a self-taught developer, and then moved, essentially always been interested in that kind of end-to-end user experience and trying to help that customer get through to that point that they're trying to get to, and being very sort of user-centric from that point of view. So naturally then moved a lot more into like marketing, user experience, design, those kind of elements that all play a key role within it all. Then I essentially kind of explored my own ideas and ran my own businesses. So I kind of really kind of being at the cold face of a lot of this stuff, and yeah, classically learned a lot of lessons the hard way as you do. And then yeah, as Caroline said, after my first business, I then sort of joined the corporate world, should we say, at Nokia, and obviously that's where we met.
And from that, I presume Lunos was born.
In some respects.
A little bit.
That's a long time
yes.
ago. Yeah, I mean, I left Nokia in like 2011, so it feels like an absolute lifetime ago.
But I think actually, working for Nokia, and not to kind of point the finger at Nokia, but, kind of seeing very large companies struggle to develop products when they are a product company, and were very good at developing products that they were very used to, but then when they needed to pivot and when they needed to evolve, then products became more of a challenge for them, and that's where we learned an awful lot.
Yeah, it's also that notion of just like, I think particularly in sort of big corporate worlds or existing companies, they're so entrenched in their day to day and somewhat kind of got their blinkers on a little bit, so it's just having that ability to just see an opportunity and start exploring it and testing those ideas and assumptions very, very quickly. I think it's just so easy to kind of forget about when you're in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
So tell us the story of Lunos. How did that start? What are you guys doing?
Well, I'm going to get James to do this bit.
Yeah, so I mean, in some respects, it's been a bit of a almost like a career journey for myself. And then essentially I left Nokia to kind of go and pursue my own things and do some of my own things. And I think, as I was touching on before, kind of having that background in tech and being a developer and marketing and design, all these kind of elements, I've had a lot of the skills on hand to kind of explore some of my own ideas. But classically in that kind of role, and I completely hold my hands up here, I've gone off and explored ideas very much of what would I do, and then having that developer mindset, being like, well, I just need to build this, and then I'll build that, and then I'll build this, and then very, very quickly it spirals way out of control. So for a long time, like, my list of ideas would be constantly growing. So it's that concept of saying, right, how can I almost like systematically test these ideas, and that's kind of where the initial seed of like what we now know as Lunos really came from. And then essentially I've been consulting with sort of early stage, idea stage startups through to like growth stage for sort of previous sort of 6-7 years. And these kind of themes were continually kind of coming up, and the fact that people have ideas for things, classic kind of thing, right, I need to go and build it in order to get it out to market, and that's how I test it, and those kind of things. Like, well, there's so many things that you can and arguably you should be doing.
First.
Yeah, absolutely, because ultimately building tech is costly. And you can very quickly just sort of layering multiple assumptions. If you're working with good tech partners, they're going to be asking really key question ultimately from their world. Yeah. But very quickly, as I say, you can't be laying all these assumptions.
And you can also solutionize too quickly, and then forget that actually there's a lot, especially now, there's a lot of tech that doesn't need to be rebuilt. You can reuse it or repurpose it, probably maybe is the better term. But I mean, adversity, I came very much forward working with much bigger companies who would never check their assumptions, who would always just kind of, we know best. We know what we're doing. We've been working with this for many years.
Before.
Absolutely. And there is a whole new world out there, and especially working in digital. And it was just like, we'll just transfer what we're doing into being digital without really understanding, well, what is the customer need here? Or what is it that you're trying to make better rather than just replace?
Yeah.
And I suppose our world has been very digital, but the theories are the same for any product, whether it is digital or not. And actually, arguably, every product has a digital presence or a digital, presence in the market. So it's, using those principles in the right way. But I mean, we came together maybe kind of from two different sides. But what's been really interesting is that it's the same experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, so we had a conversation literally before the pandemic hit.
February 2020.
Oh, so you guys were born out of pandemic.
Basically, yes. As much like my second child as well. Arguably this is my third. But yeah, I had this conversation with Caroline and sort of saying, well, this is kind of where my head's at, and this is somewhere I was interested in exploring. And almost like immediately, I think there was a spark there, and I think you were kind of exploring that. Coming back into the world of work and... Yeah,
I'd just taken 2-3 years off to have my children. In that time, I mean, I was working for an amazing agency, but there are issues in handling women still, even if it's a very modern, pioneering business. And one of the things that I was just very well aware of is the bit that I really enjoyed doing when I was working, but then I'd had time away to go, well, actually, that is the bit that I love. And then when James came and said, well, this is the bit I love to do, it was sort of the magic was born. But, not to kind of labour on that side as well, is that I think, I had to find something that flexibly would work around the fact that I'm a mum of 2 small children and I want to be doing using my brain and using my experience, but in a way that is meaningful and makes sense to both myself, my husband and my world. And I know that James is very similar, but that's something we can apply to our clients as well. It doesn't have to be this very fixed way of working with. And actually that's something also that we really pride ourselves in. Because we work with some clients who have a day job and are trying to develop an idea. Wow. So how can we then work with them in the same kind of... I mean, we're quite meta on our process because actually what our process allowed us to do is test how we work with clients. I mean, so our process we've used on ourselves, and then for us to understand that we need to have a way that's flexible for our clients to be able to, it may be that they're at different stages of their idea, or it may be that they're at different stages of where their career is in their business. And so yes, it is not just having one fixed way, which I think from a consultancy and agency point of view is a modern approach, but it's,
It's quite interesting that you started a business to create some flexibility in your life, because I think a startup is all consuming normally at some stages. How are you finding that balance?
I mean, I'd say the flexibility is that maybe we work 9 to 5 and we have a couple of children at 3. That might mean that we work until into the night. But it's
creating that way for yourself.
Absolutely. And I think arguably with the pandemic and working from home and us all kind of seeing that there isn't, we would all like to think we're working to live rather than living to work, but it just be a bit more meaningful the way that you're doing it. I mean, we really care with what we do. We want to do a good job for our clients, but in the same way, it's like being actually careful about looking after ourselves and making sure we can always do a good job for them. And that doesn't always work, but we do it.
It's always peaks and troughs.
So typically, when do clients come to you? What's that ideal stage when somebody says, I've got an idea, or like you say, some bigger companies want to expand?
I would say there is no ideal because everybody comes at different stages. We built our process in the mind of we can handle clients at very early idea. And there is our process, if you look at it in a very linear way, can handle them all the way through and to a certain extent be quite an accountable point beyond where maybe the idea is just an idea and it is actually a fully conceived business. But arguably, there are a lot of businesses out there that are already halfway through or fully evolved, where they haven't necessarily understood who their customer is, or maybe they've become stagnant or they need to pivot. And actually, you know, we are applying our process to help product teams be better at doing what they're doing as well. It is just almost like it's a refresh, because there is, you know, what we do is not brand new, but I suppose we put it in a way that's very accessible, and is very systematic, which is kind of, you know, Jay's pointed out, it creates clarity and confidence.
Ultimately, it's all kind of baked on like core like product principles. So if you step far enough away from it, it's all based on customer development and product discovery work, which is entirely relevant and should be entirely relevant throughout an entire product life cycle. But I think people will naturally see the relation in that really sort of early idea stage. But as we're kind of talking about, it's about testing an idea, which, obviously from a startup perspective, part of what we're trying to deliver is an element of like clarity. Because obviously at a really early stage of an idea, and in particular at a startup, there's potentially so many things that you think, oh, let's do this, I need to do this, I need to get this hooked up, I need to do my branding, blah, 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 blah. And the list is arguably never ending. So kind of what we're trying to do and what the process is there to try and help with is essentially try and just create a little bit of clarity and try and a bit of confidence within that. So you're kind of just saying, well, arguably, yes, okay, you could think about your branding, you know, go to market strategy and all these kind of partnerships and whatever those elements may be. But frankly, if people don't like resonate with the problem that you're trying to address, then none of those things are even going to happen. So how can we try and just
take a step back?
Take a step back and just sort of almost like park those conversations. Obviously, we're not saying ignore them. It's you need to kind of keep those things moving, but it's just to try and give that shorter term focus and clarity, so you're not just completely overwhelmed with this massive list that you think you need to do.
And we're facilitators. I mean, I think there is a view in the market as well that ideas people don't tend to become facilitators. Some do. We're not saying there's exclusivity with this, but what we're noticing is that actually if we can take away the overwhelming mountain that you need to climb to kind of get to a place where you're viable in the market and you can go out, then actually we're taking away an awful lot of pain and
uncertainty and
failure. And failing fast is, it can be interpreted in different ways.
We try to talk about it a slightly different way. We talk about trying to reduce the time to learning rather than talking about failure. I think failure, everyone's kind of got their own little version on it. Arguably at one point when we were considering like brand names, I was debating around essentially calling the business Fail to be quite like blatant, and the fact that failing is actually
fast and learn,
failing fast is a really, really good thing, and it's more about framing how you think about failure rather than the world's ended, my idea's rubbish, or whatever the things might be. It's like saying, well, that's actually you've got a learning there. So how can you move on from that learning and improve what you're doing?
And the market is kind of getting there, because it's like building public movement, and there is this sort of whole new. I mean, we get quite a few clients that come to us going, "Oh no, we kind of kept everything to ourselves because we're too nervous to get it out to the market." And it's like, well, but if you don't get it out,
how are you going to know?
How are you ever going to know?
Exactly.
And so actually, but we also understand why there is that psychology as well. They're protective. They want it to be perfect and really ready, and actually it is the opposite. It's
get it out. And
arguably that's quite a dangerous place to be, because if you're then being so protective of it, and unfortunately, I have actually worked with some clients in that kind of scenario where it's that classic scenario where you're working on your MVP, whatever it might be, and that's a whole another conversation about what a genuine MVP kind of really should be. But they're kind of working on that and just frantically kind of saying, well, we just need to add this and it needs to do that and we just need to do that and then it will be ready or perfect. And as soon as those kind of words come in, it's like, I think exactly. That's the kind of quote. It's like if you kind of launch it when you think it's ready or perfect, whatever, it's basically you've just launched it way too late.
So one of the things that we try and get people to as early as we can, apart from actually understanding who their customer is and who needs this and getting out and talking to real people on it, is what is the aha moment? And that is not exclusive for B2C. That's B2B as well. It's like, what's that moment where the end user picks it up and goes, oh my God,
I need this.
This is absolutely... And actually just channeling that can also almost be a eureka moment of, oh, okay, but I thought... No, you just need to find out, because any other step between getting that user from starting point to that aha moment almost needs to disappear. It's just getting them to that moment and understanding there may be more than one, but it's and that's almost what we're doing is not rocket science. And as James said, these principles are all out there, but it's
difficult to think about it when you're in.
Absolutely, there's a lot of books out there, and there's a lot of websites, and there's a lot of theories, and which one's the best one, and I suppose what we try to do is kind of whittle it down to the ones that we feel create the best outcome. And take people through that. And what is very important, and we actually did kind of write down some of this because in prep of kind of seeing this, but it's accessibility. It is taking away this kind of, sometimes this complex business world that they kind of shroud everything in. And I think fundamentally a lot of, especially founders, startup, that were kind of very much stuck in the startup world, kind of feel like they need to be doing it all themselves, which is actually sort of understanding your skill and your knowledge, and then knowing there are people like us out there, but they don't always know that we are. So it's that is a challenge for us.
Yeah, it's also that sense of having someone completely external to your world, and I kind of mentioned it earlier in terms of the corporate world, you kind of get your blinkers on because you're so close to it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're getting someone external, that we're just looking at it more from a high level point of view, and very systematically, slightly scientifically as well. It just kind of gives you a completely different opinion, and we're looking at it more about just trying to really get to that, as kind of like says, that aha moment for you, but also for your customers, and how you can kind of create that as quickly as possible, which may be like we don't actually need to build any tech whatsoever. So how can we get our customers to that?
It exists already, or
exists already, or you could do it manually, or whatever it is. And there's many different sort of ways that we talk about experimenting with those ideas.
But they talk about the camel rather than the unicorn these days.
Oh, I saw the post.
I quite like that. I understand that one. But actually, it was actually from another friend who posted that up, and I think that's where the world is becoming much more aware that you can, the sharing experience, partnering experience, not necessarily thinking about it all being this insular moment, and where you can become quite introspective and less open to what's around you.
So typically, I mean, what's the process that you take somebody through very high level? I mean, I know you don't want to give away too much, but typically what does that look like in terms of that process?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, a lot of the initial stuff is just us aligning ourselves with their world, where they are at the moment, what they're trying to do, where they're trying to get to. So we have an initial workshop we take clients through that is our kind of initial value exchange. It really kind of showcases how we work with clients rather than just sitting on a standard discovery call and we're frantically making notes and we just send them a proposal. It's very interactive. Had amazing feedback from that, but as I say, it's ultimately just kind of laying that baseline, where they're at, where they're trying to get to, where their current challenges are, particularly, which for us then helps us to work out, in terms of our process, maybe some areas that we can dial up or arguably dial down if they feel that some areas they've really done quite extensively. And then it's about us aligning to any pre-existing work that they've done. But ultimately, the whole thing is about a very kind of circular process where it's us kind of getting to a place where we're creating a hypothesis that what is it that we believe is true or we think is going to be right.
High risk to the end idea.
Yeah. Exactly. Or something, particularly we have very little knowledge on and we're making some really big assumption on. And then we're looking at a suite of different experimentation techniques that we've got.
Brilliant.
Then going out to market and actually testing that and ultimately talking to customers or running simulation stuff that I was alluding to earlier. Coming back to the table and looking at the results of what we got back from the market and ultimately just kind of getting to that decision point and saying, right, are we happy with this? Is this giving us confidence to move forward? So therefore we want to proceed. Do we think maybe we need to change a few things, talk to some different customers, ask some different questions, whatever it might be? So do we need to iterate, or is it a little bit more fundamental? It feels like we're really just barking up the wrong tree. So then we need to look at something more like a pivot to ultimately try and get to that place.
And that must be a kind of difficult conversation to have sometimes.
Usually, hopefully, we're very co-collaboration in the way we work. So it's very much, sort of kind of done with you model in the sense of we are hand-holding them through the facilitation of it, so it shouldn't be a surprise if they've been as involved as we hope they are. Now, actually, interestingly, we have some clients that where it may be that from a cost perspective or a time perspective, they can't do the done-with-you model with us. So we're in the process of developing more of a DIY, because there's also some incredibly able people out there who sometimes through the process we can see, actually, you can run with this.
You just need the framework to...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for us to be there for their confidence, to know that, whether we discuss it through or, cohort is something that we feel is a very strong part of that support system too. Because, when people are within the same mode, that's when they're the most helpful to each other because we're all experiencing similar things. So I think the word facilitation, kind of comes up for us an awful lot, but the co-collaboration element as well. So it's never as though we're doing it for you, giving it to them and then going bye. And that accountability is something that's really important for us as well from a longevity point of view. So it's a mindset that we hopefully are helping them get to. Yeah.
And we've spoken a little bit about the DIY, but that's quite an exciting... Is it accessible to people at the moment?
We are hopefully going to be there soon.
It's very early stages. I mean, we were kind of talking about it earlier. This is kind of where everything that we talk about gets very meta because we're using our own process on what we think DIY should be. We've got dog food our own idea essentially. And it's an interesting phrase. So we're basically working with some early clients. We're really trying about partnering up them ultimately to say, well, at the end of the day, there are so many online courses if you want to kind of chuck into that kind of world. And I've been there myself. I bought an online course. I don't know if you guys have it but
it actually makes it worse.
You sign up to an online course, I'll finish this, and you get midway through, and ultimately you never end up doing it. And we don't want to be one of those stats. No. So it's about kind of saying, well, how do you best learn, and how can we help get you to that place? But by keeping them accountable along the way and stepping into the knowledge and the experience that we've got, and obviously the process and what that stands for, and just really kind of trying to sit with that. But then, kind of where we take that in future, I think we've got a lot more potential for us because ultimately all of this, the process and kind of what it's really about is ultimately just trying to help more people get to the place where they're creating a successful, sustainable business that can go off and do the stuff that they wanted to, but potentially in a way that costs them a lot less than
failing and then having to start again.
Or if they do fail, they then find out, well, actually, there was a little opportunity over here, so I can go and explore that one, and then they go off.
I mean, there was always an old stat that 80% of, it was more in, I think, in the app and the website world of those kinds of digital ideas, 80% would change through the first 6 months of their conception. And what we're kind of almost doing is, do that, or yes, that probably is the case, but do that way before you ever get to a place where you're like,
launch doesn't have to change.
How do we reuse half the... I mean, there was a kind of saying of it's cheap to throw away a post-it note, but you need that post-it note to be pretty meaningful. That's before you kind of get it to a place where actually that becomes a good way of doing it. But so... I suppose it's nothing that we're doing is brand new in its conception, but it's kind of going from that moment where it's thoughtful. Yeah, you're getting clear insights. I mean, ultimately, the customer generally is where we start because it's even if people tell us, but we have talked to people, and when we start turning that mirror back. And we start really seeing that actually that talking is being, you probably talk to your parents or maybe the
people that love you and will support us anyway.
Absolutely, the bias is always going to be there. So if you can kind of find, and actually once we start unlocking that, you suddenly realise that audience is sitting waiting for you very loyally, and actually they will be with you throughout that whole journey, and then you're hitting the ground running when you're ready to actually get out there.
We're kind of building on that. Kind of one of the core concepts we're trying to bake into the process is when you get to that place where we are actually launching, we kind of want you to get to that place where you've already got a customer base, like a community, or some following behind it, rather than launching and then suddenly you're entirely relying on paid media. And obviously in the startup world, and the cash flow is huge. And very quickly your acquisition channels are completely dry up when you have to pause that paid media because you've got no money there. So it's another little aspect.
So a quick one I wanted to actually ask you is just for the founders out there, your own journeys. I mean, what are the challenges that you've come up against, while you've been starting up this business?
In terms of just Lunos, or
I suppose overall, what are some of the key things you see that are real challenges for people just launching the business?
Yeah, I think some of it we maybe slightly touched on before. I think it's that sense of, you come up with an idea. I've sort of alluded to that before in terms of my ideas, previous ones. And you classic kind of list out and a bunch of features or ideas, or it's going to be an app, it's a website, whatever it might be. But ultimately, very, very quickly, you can just jump into the world of solutionizing, which at the end of the day, as humans, you get addressed with a problem you want to solve
quickly.
It's human nature. So that's kind of one of our big challenges, and just trying
with
to...
With Lunos as well.
We
started off that we were going to create a bespoke process around any client that came through, and within about 3 weeks, we're like, oh my god, there's so many commonalities. We need to come up with a systematic process. It's actually, we need
a scalable process.
Exactly, and then it adapts to obviously kind of where people are in their journeys. But I think it's just trying to get to that place where you're very rapidly identifying like kind of your core assumptions around the idea, or arguably probably more on the solution side of things, and just getting something going and arguably going out in public and doing that more often rather than sitting behind closed walls.
Assuming that it's working.
This is my baby, I don't want to tell anyone about it.
I don't think very much have the vision,
100%.
but how can you start it in a small scale which allows you to address things in a stepping kind of stone aspect. Knowing your skills and your knowledge and being confident about what you know and what you don't know, I think is probably absolutely critical. And the fact that, kind of said earlier that a lot of founders still believe they need to be doing it. It's part of, my badge of honour is failing, isn't it? And getting something
doing marketing and failing, doing sales and
there's so many. So with Nick, there's so many businesses out there to help you. And actually, once you start looking, there is a lot. But we appreciate it's also quite overwhelming when you start looking. And so who's the right person to go to? And so partnering for us is being a key thing. We're not saying that that's what every founder needs to be doing, but there are probably 5 or 6 fantastic websites for founders to find other founders who might be able to kind of these cohort thing is all available out there. So what else are kind of things that
I guess kind of touching on that partner side of things, like for us, like we've got a partner ecosystem that we try and tap people into as and when they get to that right part of the journey. So whether that's development partners, because at the end of the day, we don't want to build out massive development teams, and arguably there, where do you draw the line? So designers, marketers, insert them all here. And it's just trying to work with people that are amazing at what they do. But one of our kind of key ethoses behind the partnership stuff is rather than just saying, "Oh, go chat with these guys," and we just do a referral over together. Then essentially the initial conversation is like, who are you? What's your idea? What are you trying to do? And they feel like they've just gone back like months on or whatever it might be. We then kind of onboard that partner into everything that they've done with us. So they're trying to, in terms of a partner point of view, they can get to that point of value a lot quicker.
Okay.
And then from a client perspective, it essentially kind of feels like we're one of the same team rather than lots of separate entities.
I think we're very much about trying to apply ourselves as an extension of you rather than just you're bringing us into just to do work. Because documenting rather than creating content is kind of sort of what comes off the back of that. It isn't something we came up with. There's some people that talk about it very, very meaningfully about the fact you don't need to be building your own content all the time. If you document yourself really well, that is your content stream. Because people love to hear about your journey as well.
They do. It's exciting.
I have to say, we need our petarbs really bad there. We don't do this ourselves yet, but we're trying.
But kudos to you both. That's been really good at building your partner network though. It's been amazing.
We have our strengths and our negatives too.
So before we finish up, just for the audience again, is when do people come to you? Just when is the right time? I know you've said there isn't really a right time, but if I'm a startup founder now and I'm thinking, I've got this great idea, when do I come to you? Or if I'm a bigger business thinking, we want to go into a different line.
I think, arguably it's that initial seed of the idea.
Yeah.
Because, then it's somewhat more kind of clean cut, that run it through the process and those kind of things. But naturally, people, I don't know, depending if they've got a development background or if they're a non-tech founder, then they naturally kind of think, well, I've got this idea, I need to build something digital. So potentially they immediately start talking with dev partners. Yeah. And that's kind of part of where our partner network comes in. But
so should that be before all of that, before they start speaking to those partners?
In an ideal world, I think we were talking about this before in the sense of that's kind of one of our biggest challenges, because at the end of the day, human beings, you want to solutionize, you think very much in that solution space. this, and then you create this lovely little picture in your head about, oh, my outfit will look like this, do this, have some lovely branding, and blah, 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 blah. And you're so far down that journey already, whereas we're trying to take that step back and say, well, actually, hold up.
Start with us,
Let's just work on what we think the problem is that we're trying to solve, and try and find if there's customers in the world that actually also see this problem, recognise that it's a problem, and are willing to pay for it, because that's the harsh reality of all this stuff. We can all kind of sit here and come up with amazing ideas and create a beautiful product, but then when you get it out to market, you suddenly realise actually no one cares. It's brutal as that sometimes.
Yeah. It's not an actual problem.
Exactly, Or no one's willing to pay for it. It's a vitamin rather than a pill.
You've got some great internet.
But I mean, I think in theory, if you're struggling, if you've kind of started, and whether it is you don't have confidence in knowing that the market wants it, you just need that extra validation. Maybe it's because actually you have had some interest from some investors or some funding houses, and they've kind of said you need to, you've not given us enough. That's where we have a sweet spot there, and we do work with a lot of funding and financing partners as well. That's a big part of our partnership network, because an awful lot of, at some point, need to convert from being self-funded to being funded. But then when we're working with much more existing businesses, a lot of the time it is if you're fundamentally kind of confused why your product's not working, or it's stagnated, or you're going, oh Christ, the market's moved, and I need to pivot. That is also another really sweet spot for us, because the opportunity for us is to go in and almost audit what you've done so far. And, we're not as cruel as to turn around and tell you your baby's ugly, but we might, we have to have the confidence also to challenge you and to kind of go, well, this is why it's not working. So, to a certain extent, we can say we're ultimate problem solvers or problem shooters. We can call ourselves a SWAT team, but that's why we do deal with businesses at many different levels, is because actually that does become a commonality. It's like you get to a place where you've done incredibly well maybe, and I have to say the tenacity we see out there with a lot of founders is amazing.
Absolutely.
But sometimes it is someone else coming in slightly impartially and facilitating. And as kind of we said before, there is a change in the market of the visionary doesn't necessarily become the best CEO. So actually, if you allow people like us to come in, and that might also clarify, we also work with people like Nudge, who then also work out what kind of talent you need. And does that necessarily mean that you're going to be the one leading that?
Or do you need somebody else?
Absolutely.
I mean, going back to that, you've got a great partner network, so you tap into help with
branding, marketing, funding and financing, and that doesn't necessarily mean private equity investment. That could be, there are a lot of fantastic companies out there that are matchmaking, and I don't know, can we mention our partners there? Or like
Welcome to
is a fantastic partner for us in that place. But also sales support, recruitment.
Even as far as pitch decks.
Actually, pitch deck, automated marketing and CRM, growth. You did mention.
Kind of somewhat comes under that. But I suppose they ultimately kind of come into three core aspects. So it's the development partner network, the growth side and launch phase, all that kind of thing, and the funding stuff. But I suppose within that growth area, they may kind of fall into like branding and PR and those kind of elements as well. But ultimately, we're just trying to build a network, as we were talking about, like those trusted partners that when there's a conversation, ultimately that classic conversation about branding, kind of when that comes in, which is a bit of our own little soapbox moment, but
chicken egg. I think we all agree that they're both very fundamentally necessary, and
and kind of when to tie that in. But as we say, we're just trying to like do those right introductions at the right time, but particularly with that ethos that we mentioned before, like we then onboard those partners to the stuff that we've done, so they can try and get to that moment where they're adding value as quickly as possible, rather than the need to go through all those discovery experiences.
But actually, I think they can save people not only time but money as well, because
effectively we can. And actually, with some of our partners, we are actually trying to package that together. So let's say, I mean, there's a fantastic partner we're working with. Paris Studios, I will mention you. Minimum level branding. I mean, at this point, if you're going out and experimenting in the market, well, you want to have a level of confidence that people are or you can test that brand at the same time as you're testing the market. So, I mean, one of the things that we also talk about is minimum lovable product. Well, instead of minimum viable.
Lovable, that's a great choice.
Because there needs to be a sentiment with whatever you're putting out there. You can't just like strip it all back and then go, oh, we didn't really get a lot of insight from that. And it's like, yeah, because you literally kind of gave them the bare bones.
Yes,
like, actually, so that's where then our relationship with dev partners and how can we maybe in the dev process within each sprint be able to experiment, and this is where there is is an involvement of and some development houses do it better than others, but it's
that's kind of particularly with the dev side of things. I agree from the growth side as well. That's kind of where we continue to play a role within it when we hand over to those dev partners, because as Caroline says, like, rather than say, right, okay, we've identified what the solution is, we know what we need to build, let's just go away and build it. And very quickly you can get back into the blinker mode and you're just building features upon features upon features and then getting very protective about it. So we're then constantly trying to say, right, let's work out like what we should build now, and then we can go back out to the market, test it with the initial audience that we've been building all the way from day one, and kind of keep those conversations going, just to make sure at no point like we suddenly start going down an assumption like
rabbit hole
coming up with new random features left, right and centre, whatever it might be. But then constantly, just because we have kind of been involved since the early days and we kind of know where they want to get to, and also particularly for like non-tech founders who may have never worked with a dev partner before, it could be a very interesting
dynamic.
I'll say interesting. Interesting curveballs left, right and centre. We're essentially helping to bridge that gap.
And then actually, a competency that we're doing more and more actually now is becoming product advisors. I mean, we've always seen ourselves an extension of their team anyway, but when they get to a place where they've gone from a startup or even like a solo founder to then actually being able to take off the wheels you have with your children? The training wheels. My kid had a balance bike, that's why I wasn't sure. Kind of feeling as though they're not going to kind of have this gap between what they've done with us and then they kind of step on and then they're like, and what next?
It's a really exciting space.
It's a really exciting space. We can talk so much
very
about it.
How do people get hold of you? We're going to post all socials and your website links. That is the best way through website, book discovery.
Heylunos.com.
And we're on social media and those kind of things. But predominantly through website is really a good.
And Lunos, I mean, might as well say, Lunos is actually a Finnish word. It means draft or prototype. We did remove an N, in an S. I can't remember actually what we tried to make it a bit shorter. But even the name, we hope is kind of something that resonates, because it's.
Something what you do.
Just draft everything before you.
Draft, sketch and plan.
Well, it's been wonderful speaking to you both. Thank you so much for coming on, and we look forward to working with you both more.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's doing this, Cool.